We left off on Friday talking about Socrates' ranking or hierarchy of loves and desires. And as we'll remember, at the very top, Socrates put the love of wisdom, characteristic of a philosopher. The second best kind of love, Socrates claims, is the love of competition, the kind of love that a soldier would have, a soldier who wants to win a battle, but in the right way, in an honorable way. Coming into the more material side of love, leaving the more ideal realm, the realm of ideals or ideas, Socrates would say, we have the love of profit, which is characteristic of an ordinary person, say a businessman like Cephalus. The love of profit has a sensual side to it, the side of bodily pleasures, but it also has the side of social status. As we know, social status tends to increase when you have an increase of personal or household wealth. But the main point of this slide is that the love of the tyrant's love of perversion, is below the threshold of any healthy desires. So all the desires listed here in black, those are healthy, those are normal. They do lead to certain kinds of satisfaction. The higher desires are more satisfying than the lower desires. The higher desires are, they last longer when you satisfy those desires. The satisfactions last longer than the lower desires. And here at the bottom, Socrates says you'll find the least satisfying, the least healthy, and the least worth it kinds of love. And this is the love of the tyrant to use violence in order to dominate others. Okay, so Socrates is leveling two claims about the tyrant's way of life. The first is, as we talked about last week, that living in a tyrannical city as the tyrant is not a particularly satisfying experience. Socrates reasons that the tyrant will be in constant fear of being assassinated, of being overthrown, of facing rebellions, and so forth. Socrates is saying, how can the tyrant's life be worth pursuing in that case? But Socrates has a deeper claim. Socrates has a deeper claim. Even if the tyrant, for some reason, really enjoyed using violence against other people and ruling as a kind of absolute master of the city, even if the tyrant thought that he was really enjoying all those activities, Socrates would say that tyrant is deluded. It's more like that tyrant is addicted to this perverse lifestyle. So you can imagine the immediate objection of a tyrant type, of a Thrasymachus type, for example, would be for you, Socrates, to say that this lifestyle is really that unhealthy. Who are you to say, Socrates, that this lifestyle is that unsatisfying? Isn't happiness completely subjective? If the tyrant says they're happy, aren't they happy? Socrates is not buying that argument. And Socrates is going to say that if you're going to rank the different kinds of enjoyment that come from the satisfaction of different kinds of love, the best qualified to judge this question is not the tyrant, but the philosopher. In fact, the tyrant is the worst qualified to judge this question of who is truly happy. Well, now the question arises, why should non-philosophers trust the judgment of the philosopher regarding happiness? Socrates is going to say, the lover of wisdom, the person who has attained the highest kinds of love, Platonic love at the top of that ranking, the lover of wisdom has experienced everything that lovers of honor and lovers of profit have experienced. So Socrates would say, a philosopher has had a very good meal before and knows what bodily pleasures are like. The philosopher has also known what honorable competition is like. They have taken part in battles, for example. And most importantly, the philosopher has also had the experience of knowing the truth and developing their reason. So the person at the top of the pyramid has experienced everything that the people lower down the pyramid have experienced. But the reverse is not true. The person at the bottom of the pyramid has not experienced the highest kind of love. And the person at the bottom of the pyramid has not experienced the love of honorable competition. Okay, so much of this claim that the philosopher's judgment is the best comes down to a greater scope of experience. The second argument Socrates makes is that the philosopher knows the difference between true pleasures and false pleasures. So true pleasures are long-lasting and they are truly satisfying and they build upon one another. So for example, if you're passing through the education system and at first you're learning about poetry and stories and you're training your body, and then later you start training your mind with mathematics and philosophy, you're building upon the accomplishments at of the lower levels of education. It's not like you lose those accomplishments. And then you're attaining yet higher forms of wisdom. And Socrates says, take the opposite case of the tyrant. The tyrant is never satisfied. There is never a case where it will be enough people have been oppressed. It will never be the case when enough blood has been spilled. There will never be a case where the tyrant will be satisfied. Oh, they're bowing and scraping today, but they don't have to do it tomorrow because now I'm satisfied. No, he's never satisfied. Socrates says that the false happiness of the tyrant is really more like an addiction. And Socrates doesn't use this language because it's contemporary, but what he's really thinking about is, say somebody's really addicted to drugs, and we don't even have to take a hard drug, just take something like nicotine or caffeine. And Socrates would ask, have you ever noticed that a caffeine addict or a nicotine addict gets really antsy when they don't have their fix? And the reason is they're suffering from the pain of addiction. Okay, and Socrates would compare that pain of addiction to the pain a tyrant gets when they're not out there tyrannizing their subjects. And then when somebody gets a drug addict gets their fix, they feel what they perceive as pleasure. But is that really pleasure? Socrates would say, no, that's not really pleasure, because first of all, you're going to need another fix in a couple hours. And secondly, what you're really experiencing is a release from pain. It's like your body was tensed up and then it was allowed to relax a little bit. That's not positively speaking pleasure. That is simply release from pain. And similarly, when the tyrant is out there tyrannizing, getting other people to treat him like he's some kind of god and treating his subjects as if they were slaves and so forth, that's being released from the pain of not having the fix of tyranny. And really, the big point here is true happiness only comes from true excellence. You can't get the real deal of pleasure unless you are practicing the real deal of expertise. There is not anything particularly satisfying about being a quack doctor, Socrates would say. At some level, you know it's a fake. At some level, you know that the money you get from swindling people, selling fake medicines and fake cures is not helping the world or helping yourself. and you know at some level that your life is not really worth living. Now, if a pseudo expert, like a quack medicine person, a quack doctor, is really actually not that happy or satisfied, Socrates would say, just take that argument one step further with the tyrant. At a certain level, when the tyrant wakes up in the morning and feels this addiction to doing violence and spilling blood, they know that's not healthy. At a certain level, when the tyrant is looking at themselves in the mirror, himself maybe, in the mirror, they know they're not looking at a good person. And at a certain level, they know they're absolutely miserable. And there may be a certain kind of pleasure in doing evil, a certain kind of pleasure in doing injustice, but it's not true pleasure, because true pleasure comes from the pursuit of true excellence. That's the Socratic idea. And the idea is when you pursue the highest excellences, for example, the examined life of philosophy, only then are you living a life worth living. Only then are you pursuing the just life.